Thanks for being with us. Images out of Africa tend to portray a continent struggling with poverty, conflict and disease. But the real picture is far more complicated than just food or famine. Public and private sector groups are now coming together with much more determination to push African nations to work together with the long-term goal of a self-sustaining and thriving continent. Set against the ticking clock of climate change is the race against time to harness new technologies to transform how Africa feeds its people and secures a sustainable future. Well, helping us to discuss that, we have with us Nobel Peace Prize winner Norman Borlaug, whose pioneering wheat improvement program transformed agriculture across the world, lifting billions out of poverty. And Josephine Okot, founder and managing director of the thriving Victoria Seeds Company based out of Uganda. Well, it's great to speak with both of you. Professor, I've got to start with a question to you. It's been a good 3.5, 4 decades since you started pioneering agricultural techniques. Why do you think in the case of Africa has it taken so long to take steps forward? Why hasn't Africa had its green revolution?
Well, I think in large part because of the infrastructure. During the colonial period, the railroads in Africa were developed to the mines, gold mines and the mineral mines, whereas in Asia, they were developed into agricultural areas. Agricultural produce was the purpose of those railroads. Take the case of India, before separation of Pakistan and India. It was the primary source of cotton fiber for British industry. And consequently, they had to have railroads going into a productive agricultural area, and it was the Punjab.
Why didn't Africa move on, though, from that? Why did it not, when it really had more control of its own destiny, start to develop the infrastructure to service the agricultural sector?
Those are questions that are very difficult to answer because part of it, I think, though, comes back to what the colonial powers wanted from each continent. And one, it was agriculture for industry, and the other was minerals. In the case of cotton, the local governments and the farmers had to build the roads into the railroad landing. And that led to development along those roads.
Well, Josephine, I should congratulate you on the success of your company. Well done, and the awards and recognition you've had for that. You're part of a new generation of entrepreneurs, African entrepreneurs, who are willing to take risks, willing to move forward. And I wonder, from your perspective, how you're sort of breaking ground with African tradition in taking risks. How hard is it to take risks?
Well, I wonder whether you'd say it's African tradition. I would really put it this way: the environment, the business environment makes it very challenging to take risk. But as somebody who really is determined to make a difference in African agriculture, I took the bold move and founded this seed company so that in our small way, in our own environment, we can increase agricultural productivity. But the underlying reason was believing in myself and believing in the goal I set before, and also venturing into a business or into a profession that I love to do, that is seed.
Now, how have your seeds fundamentally helped to change the way agriculture is done, or how much has it contributed to the African Green Revolution?
Well, if you talk of Africa is huge. It's the second largest continent, and when you speak of Victoria Seeds, my turnover is barely $2 million. So frankly, it's small in when you put it in that context. But in the context of Uganda seed industry, it's about 25% market share. So the difference is, it's not just the tangible benefits getting to the farmers, but also motivating other entrepreneurs downstream at agro-dealer level, and also identifying new opportunities along the value chain and getting new varieties that could help these farmers get new markets, either internally with the industries or externally in the export market. So I look at it in a bigger perspective. So definitely increasing yields is just one of the tangible outputs from the company.
Professor, we had a couple of emails from viewers to the show on this subject, and I want to put one of them to you. It came from a person who lives between the USA and Malaysia, Kenneth Lee McKee, who says, "It all comes down to education of the masses. Missionaries tried to teach them values and economies over the last 200 years. White people in Africa are now being driven off the land." Now, I'm not sure if our viewer is thinking that this is a bad thing, but I wonder to what extent you feel that African leaders themselves, once they were in the post-colonial period, managed to create the kind of governance that was needed for Africa to move forward.
Well, I think also there's another difference. When we talk about Africa, we're talking about a continent. In the case of most of the discussions on Asia, or during that Green Revolution period, was Pakistan and India. A decade later, China came in. Sure, there was change also in Iran, in Egypt especially, and in Iraq, all of those, but it was primarily in that period the two countries.
Tell me about that
Whereas
time.
it was a continent in the case of Africa.
Right. Now, tell me about that time, Professor, that it was an era where your work was pioneering. It helped to lift billions of people out of poverty. Just tell me what that process you went through, the reaction, seeing the success, and your own personal satisfaction of what you achieved.
Well, in the first place, it was the wheat crop that led the charge to make the first big impact. But close on the heels of that came the improved rices. My philosophy is that if we can make a major breakthrough on one crop and you picked a good one, in the case of maize for Africa, other crops will improve also.
I was wondering, Josephine, in the case of your company, how much governmental support you had, how much the environment was facilitated for you to be able to grow, how much really the leadership of your country took responsibility in helping?
Well, perhaps I should commend my government, the government of Uganda, for coming up with this policy or plan for the modernization of agriculture that is targeted to encouraging adoption of inputs or new technologies by farmers. So I think that in a way made it easier for us to get technologies to the farmers, and there is a body set up, an autonomous body that provides extension service. But that having been said, I am also, of course, I would like to see the government focus on getting small and medium enterprises being more competitive, helping them to succeed, because they generate the wealth, they provide the bulk of employment, and not the few large companies. So a few things the government could do is help us with reduce the cost of business, and things like 30% corporation tax. If I'm a government, I'll ask, shouldn't I leave them to generate more employment instead of demanding for tax revenue? Wouldn't I like to see more Ugandans having jobs? So
on that basis, actually, an email I'd like to put to you we got from Oman. Khalid Al-Haribi wrote in saying, "Africa needs charismatic leaders that are determined to create an independent culture that believes in African self-sufficiency." That's a perception in many areas that the African leadership is lacking. Do you feel that is the case when you look at other countries in Africa too?
Yeah, I think in most cases, whether it's their perception or because of the legacy of colonialism, generally many times they're forced to take in policies that they probably wouldn't accept, because when donors give money, they peg it with conditions. So many of those same donors or development partners don't work with the private sectors like myself, who are the wealth creators. We should be at the forefront determining policies, not the bureaucrats at government discussing with the donors what is best for the SME. So in a way, yes, but sometimes it's not entirely their fault. They are forced to accept non-workable policies, and it trickles down, and the investment climate is not really very conducive for the small and medium enterprises to grow.
Professor, what do you feel are the steps needed to be taken now across the continent? And I accept, as you say, Africa is a continent, a collection of countries. But in general, if there's one step that African nations could take that could actually help facilitate a growth, what would it be?
Well, it's difficult when you talk about a continent because it's very different than one or two countries. But let me say that it comes back to infrastructure.
Well, I wonder, Josephine, with the technology developing as quickly as it has, how much that has helped you and as you move forward. I mean, actually a question, why would you not use genetically modified seeds? Why wouldn't that help when the potential is there?
Well, I would get genetically modified seeds to the farmers, but frankly, the challenge now is just to get them increase their productivity. They first of all need the fertilizer. They still depend on rain-fed agriculture. They need infrastructure that can improve their quality so that they can get their output to the market and get a good price, an attractive price for it. And they need to be competitive in the global environment. So that, of course, biotechnology, genetically modified seed is just one of the technologies. So if
technology is helping you, though, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It is. Technology is helping a lot, but not genetically modified conventional seeds. But conventional seeds still improves the yield of the farmers. But as of now, before we take that giant step and give them genetically modified seed, I think we still need to address these other issues. But things like biotechnology, technology like tissue culture is being used now. We are getting clean plantlets, clean potato vines, clean cassava cuttings to the farmers, and that is making a difference.
Professor, how do you regard that, the jump in technology since you first started working on all this?
Well, I think that what my friend here just said is that the first steps you have to have based on traditional Mendelian genetics and plant breeding. The new things, biotechnology, is the frosting on that cake that holds up the frosting. In other words, you understand what I mean by frosting, the sweet thing that you put on top of the roll. But you have to have good genetics and plant breeding, taking into consideration productivity, yield per hectare, resistant to major diseases in insects, and then agronomic practices that permit the expression of the genetic potential that's in the variety. Because we can transfer now some very interesting genes from entirely inaccessible at the old Mendelian type of genetics, doesn't mean that the old genetics and plant breeding is obsolete. It's the props on which all of this is built.
I wonder, if you look at the situation of Africa, Josephine, you really feel the African revolution is here, the green revolution.
Do I feel it's here? I feel the will to get the African green revolution. The will is there, but I would only say there's a green revolution when we see the downward spiral in agricultural productivity reversing. That is when we stop importing food, for instance. Well, we may need to, but not because we are failing to produce enough. And then I would like to see African agriculture integrated more in the world economy. Right now, we only share 2% of the world trade, and it declined from 8% to 2%. But if we are more innovative, if we can produce perhaps more or work on more value addition, then the revolution would be there. And all the technologies, to me, both biotechnology or inorganic and conventional farming system should be allowed. We shouldn't really focus on any one of them. Each of them can get Africa to a green revolution, but I still see we are at a stage where we are talking about, we are committed, there is a will, but on the ground, I'm sure the productivity is still at this present time low. But with all these initiatives, I hope it will be reversed, and that is my dream, that we see an African green revolution sooner than later.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Josephine and Professor, for joining us and talking about this subject. Thank you, sir. And thank you for being with us for this special edition of the show coming to you from Oslo in Norway. Don't forget, if you have any ideas or pressing issues you'd like us to cover on the show, just send us an email to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk's coming up next.
Genetically.